Okay, now that we have the fish finder and rod mount holder firmly secured, we can move to the next step of installing the transducer as well as installing the power supply. Let's take a look at the materials that will be required to complete the installation. First, you have a 12 volt 3.5 milliamp battery with two connectors on top that will connect it to the power supply cable on the fish finder. We have a battery charger, wire crimpers, life seal sealant, a waterproof bag, a Sharpie, wire cutters, multiple zip ties, a knife, and a sponge. The first step you'll take is to open up the front compartment and remove the cabling that we put in earlier. First, take out the power cable and just hang it over to the side. Then grab the transducer and pull out all of the cabling associated with the transducer as well. What we'd like to do is go ahead and take the sponge and lay the transducer on top of the sponge and then trace around it with a Sharpie. Ideally, what we will do is leave a hole in the center of this sponge, actually that the transducer will slide down into, with about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch on either side all the way around, so that we can create a cavity that we can fill with life sealant and actually put the transducer in on top of. So I'll go ahead and do that now. What you'll end up with is something that looks like this, where the transducer will actually slide down into the sponge, and the sponge will provide some protection should you be storing additional gear inside the hull. Go ahead and remove the transducer, set it aside, and what we will do is take the life seal or the boat goop and actually put a layer of sealant around the sponge. And then we will place the sponge as far back into the center of the kayak as we can reach. So basically, put a layer of sealant around, reach back in as far as you can, place it down, and then you're going to want to let that set for 5 to 10 minutes before moving on to the next step, which will basically use the life sealant to fill up the inside of the cavity of the sponge, and then place the transducer down into the sponge to hold it in place. As you can see, I've put sealant in the bottom of the sponge. Now I will place the transducer inside of the sponge, making sure not to press it all the way down to the hull, but to leave about 1/4 of an inch gap of sealant between the hull and the bottom of the transducer. Make sure that the transducer is parallel with the bottom of the kayak. In this case, I had to push the back half of the transducer down lower than the front to make sure that it was parallel with the bottom. Be sure to let this sealant set for 24 hours before any movement of the transducer itself. This will make sure it's stable and stays in place and has a nice tight seal. While we're waiting for that to dry, you can take your power cable. Mine comes with a fuse already attached, and we can go ahead and connect it to our connectors. Just take your wire crimpers, Alright, once you get your connectors on, we can go ahead and test power to the fish finder itself. Connect the black wire to the negative and the red wire to the positive of the battery. And we have power now. Alright, so once we have power to the fish finder, it's obviously not going to be working properly because we're not in a body of water. But one of the things you can do to test it, most fish finders will actually have a simulator. So if you go into setup and then go into simulator, and turn that on, it will simulate a body of water and actually show structure beneath the water as well as fish in different depths, just to make sure that the power is working fine and your actual unit is working. And to turn that off, you just go back into setup, go into the simulator again, and turn that off. And then we'll power it down. Now you want to grab your wet bag or dry bag and go ahead and place your battery inside with it connected to the power cables. Just drop it down inside of the boat and grab your transducer cables and put them inside the bag as well. And I like to put all the cables over to one side of the bag so that I can hold them with my fingers as I roll this up. Basically, I like to give it at least 3 wraps of the bag. And snap it together. And now, just use this to actually hook onto the J-hook that's on the inside of the kayak. And that will keep it nice and sound while you're moving around in your kayak. Alright, and here's a view of what the battery bag looks like when stored inside of the hull of the kayak. As you can see, it's hanging on the J-hook, and then you've got the cables coming in from the Fishfinder up above, down through the J-hook on the right side, and then going back to the transponder or transducer itself and into the wet dry bag. Alright, just want to let you guys know that the installation went well. Fishfinder's working as advertised. Hasn't found a lot of fish, but it is working. And just took it out to a local lake here and was able to test some of the shallow depths with my paddle, and everything is working fine. So rod holder's working well too. So I hope you guys have as much luck as I did with the installation video. Alright, well that pretty much concludes the video. We've got our Canon fish rod holder in place, Garmin Fishfinder. We've got our battery up front with the J-hook to hold that in place as you're moving about in your kayak. The last thing I wanted to cover was to make sure that you got a battery charger for the battery if you choose to go with this application. At some point you will need to charge the battery, and I recommend getting an automatic charger that knows when the battery is charged and will automatically turn itself off. I picked this one up at the local hardware store for about $25. So hopefully this video has been helpful and will make your installation a little bit easier. Thank you.